JT Westersill of Locked On Utes. JT, this is a great tweet from Bill Connolly with ESPN, who's quote tweeting Heather Dinich, who brings up a lot of great points about the SEC and the Big Ten and where they want the college football playoff to go. And Connolly points out, and I quote, attorneys for both leagues will be present as they want to be very careful to avoid anything that can be construed as collusion. Connolly then says, have to wonder how collusion would look different than what they have done over the last year. Mm-hmm. These two leagues are walking into a room, shutting the door, not allowing the Mountain West, the Big 12, the ACC in there, and making every decision about the future of college football without anyone else. That's what tampering is. That's what they are colluding to take the sport in a direction that doesn't feature everyone else at the table.
I think this is really complicated of where they could the ACC, could the Big 12 actually say, hey, you're colluding against us, like we're going to take you to court and all this. Unfortunately, I don't think it would work and hold up, because you make a really are they not including them in those meetings in terms of not inviting them? Yes, but it's not like they're necessarily like, oh, hey, like we're keeping you out, like you're trying to get into this and we're actively keeping you out of it, in terms of they're generally meeting without them. Yes, but they're not locking them out per se, like in the literal definition of it. So this is where the legal jargon all gets really tough. So I doing my best to do I know Drake, you always do a great job of leading through all the legal documents. So I give you a lot of credit and props to that. So I did a little bit of digging my own. I looked up the definition of collusion. It's an illegal cooperation or conspiracy, especially in order to cheat or deceive others. So cheat or deceive is very intriguing, because that's maybe what's going on, although I don't know if it's actually cheating and deceiving as much as it is. And I don't like this at all. I want to make that very clear. But I do feel like this is the Big Ten, the SEC, trying to maximize the value that they have brought to college football. And I don't love that, once again, but the top brands in the sport do reside in the Big Ten, the SEC. So if they walk in and say, hey, we bring the most money, we deserve the most money, and we deserve the most auto bids, I don't like that, but I'm not sure that's enough to say, hey, we're taking you to court, that's colluding. Because if we went to court, they could literally say, here are the ratings in which our games generate the most revenue and things of that nature. So that's where I have a hard time seeing how it would hold up in court. But I haven't even watched Law and Order, so I can't get too deep into all this.
Yeah, I'm steadily trying to understand, as a journalism major from Baylor, what exactly the collusion side of this would be and how you prove that. Yes. You know, as a college football fan, I think the first thing I want to consider this as is collusion, because I know it's to the detriment of certain aspects of this sport, of the reason we love this sport, of the competitive equality that every university has in college football that is going away with revenue sharing, NIL, the transfer portal. I mean, things are getting crazier and crazier. And what is even scarier than 2025, this is a direct quote from Dinich's article, the CFP conversations unfolding across all leagues are twofold. Possible changes for 2025, which would have to be unanimous, and more significant changes for 2026, which don't have to be unanimous. The SEC and the Big Ten are discussing both, with seeding at the top of the list as a potential quick fix for this fall if every other conference and Notre Dame agree to it. That 2026 part we kind of brushed over in the ESPN article. These two leagues are in meetings right now where they're discussing the future of the college football playoff. Like that is, in a year's time, whatever the SEC wants to do. If that's 4 automatic bids, 5 automatic bids, the Big 12 gets 1, the Big 12 gets 2. They're going to move forward with that. They're trying to basically take everybody else out of college football, it feels like.
It absolutely feels that way. And that's where it's frustrating. And I'm just really hoping that they do at least want to continue this playoff of including the ACC, the Big 12, a group of 5 team. But I will say this, like, what were to happen if a group of 5 team upset a Big 10 or an SEC team? Would they look at this from a financial standpoint and be like, why are we even risking this when we could just have our own teams playing against each other and maybe eventually separate? It does feel like we're heading for super conferences. If you said to me, are the Big 10 and the SEC affiliated with the NCAA in 10 years for the first time? Well, I guess the couple years has been talked about, but like really, it doesn't feel like that's a for sure thing anymore, which is a very scary future. And the fact that could be a reality, it does feel like they want to separate themselves more from all other leagues. They want to keep all of the revenue as much as they can for themselves. I mean, this is a greed move, right? Like, if this is not what's good for college football, I can't be the only one when I said, like, hey, this would be awful for the sport, the competitive nature of it. We're just going to allow 4 SEC and 4 Big Ten teams in just because. Like, that's not what's good for what we all love about college football, but it's very good for the SEC and the Big Ten, what is good for those brands to make playoffs, win playoff games, and win national championships. And what's the way you get all of that? By automatically getting more teams into that field. And that's what they want to propose. And I really wish they could stand in their way, but I don't feel like the Big 12 and the ACC are equipped to. I really don't like the direction college football is heading in, Drake. I'm very concerned. And I feel like we are going to end up seeing the SEC and the Big 10 winning. They're going to get their auto bids. And I'm just hoping now that we continue to have games like Texas, Arizona State, like where those teams get to play each other. Hopefully Arizona State ends up on top too, but I want those teams to continue to play each other. My fear is someday we would have 2 separate ones or maybe a super conference. I don't know. There are a lot of outcomes and I don't like most of them.
Now, the other quote that stood out to me is one in the ESPN article from an ACC source saying, it does become a little bit of an invitational. Will there be circumstances where a Big 12 or ACC might have 3 really good and deserving teams to come in and all of a sudden these spots are taken up through other teams from the SEC or the Big 10? That's a difficult one. I also understand that who has the gold makes a little bit of the rules, right? And that's what this is, like the manifest destiny of college football, where you kind of sit down and shut up because you have to, because dad's got the speaking stick. And when he's got the talking stick, that's who's going to have to lay down the law. I just, maybe the craziest part of this whole deal is, to me, it's not just the SEC and the Big Ten, but the entity that has the contract through 2031 for the college football playoff, ESPN.
Yeah.
You know they have a say in this. They have like $1 billion per year investment in this. You know that ESPN is pulling the strings behind the scenes, and they probably themselves want to see more SEC and Big Ten teams in there.
Potentially. I will say, I'm trying to remember now if it was, I think it was the Ross Dellinger one, Drake, that he said ESPN does not feel great about auto bids just for hurting the competitive nature of the product, because that is something that's really dangerous. And Drake, I brought this up before. Like, if you're the SEC and the Big Ten, why are you trying to make yourselves look bad? Drake, out of 10 playoffs, like, let's just predict, how many of those playoffs, like 10 different playoffs, how many of them would not include 4 SEC and 4 Big Ten teams? Like, just how, if that was just if it was a 16 team field, like how many of those would not include 8 teams? Like,
probably few, probably very few.
So why are we doing this on the risk? Like, I'm sorry, Alabama, you're one team, like Alabama, Ole Miss. Like, I'm sorry, the SEC only got 3 teams in this year, and you still got 3 really good teams in. Like, you're fine. Whatever other team we let in too, they're not going to make the natty. It's just, I guess that's where it just becomes a money deal, because then it's like, well, if we beat another team, we're still earning more money. So I guess that's where it becomes frustrating. But I'm not trying to defend ESPN too much here either, because we know that the destruction of the Pac-12, ESPN was very much involved in that. We've heard all the reports and everything too, like from the negotiations and everything that started there too. So the reason that conference realignment and we're in this position and everything, the TV networks play a massive role in that. This is such a complicated and complex thing. And it's just amazing, Drake. I mean, you and I have been with this network for a couple of years, and we talked about conference realignment a little bit, but to now be talking about the TV deals and auto bid, it just changes every year so much. It's wild.
Every offseason's crazy. There's always something that's not good. Coming up, this is good if you're a Utah or BYU fan. The state of Utah owns Kansas in basketball. Who saw that coming? This is a Locked On Big 12 Locked On Utes crossover.